Welcome back to another episode of Psychiatry Rewritten. My name is Lane. Today's episode is about the brain-gut axis. So we've all heard the phrase gut feeling, but what most people don't realize is that your gut really does function like a second brain. The enteric nervous system, which is made up of about 500 million neurons that line your intestines, is constantly sending messages back and forth with your central nervous system. And this has moved from theory into clinical reality. It's one of the fastest growing fields in psychiatry and medicine because it forces us to rethink how we treat conditions like anxiety, depression, and IBS. If we only focus on the brain and ignore the gut, we're missing half the conversation. So today, we're going to explore this hidden dialogue, the brain-gut axis, how nerves, hormones, and even the trillions of microbes in your gut are shaping your mood, your stress level, your stress response, and your overall mental health. And why understanding this could change the way we think about psychiatry and our mental states altogether. When we talk about the brain-gut axis, we're talking about a constant two-way conversation between your central nervous system, which is your brain and your spinal cord, between what's called your enteric nervous system, which is the network of neurons lining your digestive tract. And here's the wild part. Your gut isn't just passively taking orders from your brain. It has about 500 million neurons of its own. That's more than the spinal cord in some animals. It's why scientists often call the gut the second brain, and why the phrase gut feeling exists. Most emotions originate in the brain, specifically in structures like hippocampus, insula, and prefrontal cortex. And it's funny because I was thinking about, where do feelings live in your body? I've thought about that before. I've had somebody ask me that before. And I've asked people that, and they've been confused by the question. But think about that for a second. Where, if anywhere, feelings live or exist in your body, where do they originate from? I started to think about that, and that's what kind of led me to talk about this. These regions, like the insula, the hippocampus, detect threats, assign meaning, and regulate intensity of your emotions. For example, fear heavily involves the amygdala, while the insula lights up with disgust. So, in one sense, feelings live in the brain, but the brain rarely experiences them in isolation. Emotions show up in the body through the autonomic nervous system. So that looks like anxiety equals racing heart, sweaty palms, tight chest, tunnel vision, and then sadness equates to heavy chest, lump in throat, low energy. Anger feels flushed face, tight muscles, a clenched jaw. This is because the brain is constantly messaging the body via the vagus nerve and just different stress hormones. We often feel emotions in the body before we consciously recognize them in the brain. There's actually a cool set of studies from Finland where researchers asked people to basically color where they felt different emotions on a body outline on a piece of paper. Like they would give them this piece of paper with the body outline and tell them to color where they felt different emotions. And what they found across cultures, the patterns were surprisingly consistent. Happiness, for a lot of people, felt and looked like a glowing warmth in their chest, their face, and maybe their arms. Sadness was like a heaviness in the chest and the limbs. Fear and anxiety could be fight or flight, like chest and stomach activation, basically. And then anger, which looked like or felt like red heat in the head and arms. In this sense, each emotion has a kind of body map signature. Some traditions, like somatic therapy, mindfulness, or even Eastern medicine, would say feelings don't just originate in the brain or body, they circulate between them. The gut, the enteric nervous system, is often called the second brain because many people truly feel emotions in their stomach or intestines. The heart has its own neural network called the heart-brain network, just like the gut-brain axis. It influences how we process emotions like compassion, love, and grief. So that's pretty interesting. The heart has its own network, the heart-brain, that influences how we process emotions like compassion, love, and grief. So just think about that and the way that we classify or try to separate the mind and the body so much, or have in the past. Because if you think about it, emotions might be generated in the brain, but they live in the body. They announce themselves in your chest, stomach, throat, muscles. That's why the phrase, "I feel it in my gut," or "my heart sank," isn't just metaphorical. The main messenger carrying signals back and forth is the vagus nerve. So think of it like a huge superhighway that runs from your brainstem all the way down into your chest and abdomen and intestines. About 80% of the fibers in the vagus nerve run upward, meaning your gut is constantly sending information to your brain, not just the other way around. The vagus nerve is the longest cranial nerve running from the brainstem all the way down through the chest and abdomen. Like I said, while people often think of it as the brain controlling the gut, that's not the way it actually is. Because only about 20% then are efferent, which means the brain is sending the signal to the body, which actually makes the relationship a lot more gut-led than brain-led, like most of us assume. Your enteric nervous system, often called the second brain, generates and processes tons of information on its own. It doesn't just wait for orders. Through the vagus, it's constantly sending updates like nutrient and energy status, hormone levels like ghrelin for hunger, serotonin for mood, cortisol for stress, and then immune signals like inflammation and infection, viral, bacterial. These signals can influence mood decision making and even social behavior. That's why gut issues are so closely linked to anxiety, depression, and irritability. When your gut is inflamed, dysregulated, imbalanced, or just missing healthy bacteria, the vagus nerve carries that distress message up to your brain. They're in constant communication. This helps explain why people with IBS, Crohn's, or even just food intolerances often report anxiety, brain fog, or general low mood. And then there's the chemical side of the conversation. Neurotransmitters. The same brain chemicals we prescribe medications for are being made in the gut. Around 90% to 95% of serotonin is produced in the intestines. Gut bacteria play a role in producing dopamine and GABA and other compounds that affect mood, sleep, and focus. It's not just a metaphor. Gut feeling is describing this very real biology. Your gut is sending stress, safety, hunger, fear, even joy signals, and relaying that information directly back to your brain. This means the brain-gut axis is not just about digestion. It's about your mental health, your stress resilience, and your emotional regulation. And once you see it this way, it becomes impossible to treat the brain without considering the gut. When people think of brain chemicals like serotonin, dopamine, or GABA, they usually imagine the brain itself producing them. But here's the curveball. Your gut is one of the largest chemical factories in your body. So about 90 to 95% of serotonin, like we talked about, the neurotransmitter we think of as stabilizing mood, regulating sleep, even affecting appetite, is produced in your intestines, not in your head. Your gut is also home to an astonishing ecosystem over 100 trillion microbes weighing about 2 to 3 pounds in total, which is actually roughly the same as your brain. These microbes don't just digest food. They actually help manufacture and regulate neurotransmitters. For instance, over 50% of dopamine is produced in the gut, and certain strains of lactobacilli and Phytobacterium influence GABA, the calming chemical that helps quiet overactive brain circuits. The byproducts of digestion, which are called metabolites, are also chemical messengers. They can cross into the bloodstream, they influence inflammation, and even reach the brain. For example, short-chain fatty acids, butyrate, and acetate, these are produced when bacteria break down dietary fiber. These compounds have been shown to reduce inflammation and influence brain function. Studies linking them to lower rates of anxiety and depression symptoms. This is where things take a fascinating turn and they become more complicated. If your microbiome is diverse and balanced, it tends to support mental health. But if it's disrupted, say after repeated antibiotic prescriptions, chronic stress, or a diet high in sugar and processed foods, that chemical balance can shift. Researchers call this dysbiosis, and it's been linked to higher rates of depression, anxiety, and even cognitive decline. They're always coming for our memory, guys. So the brain-gut axis isn't just nerves and signals. It's a whole chemical conversation. Now we've got the nerves, we've got the chemistry, we've got the microbes. But what does this actually mean for real people? The most obvious place you see the brain-gut axis at work is in irritable bowel syndrome, or IBS, because about 1 in 10 people worldwide live with IBS. Symptoms like cramping, bloating, diarrhea, and constipation often flare up during times of increased stress. For years, people were told it was just in their head. But the truth is, the gut is reacting to the brain, and the brain is reacting to the gut. Vice versa. A cycle. Mental health conditions like anxiety and depression are strongly linked to gut function. One large study found that people with major depression are more than twice as likely to also have IBS. Another showed that people with anxiety disorders often have measurable changes in their microbiome, such as less diversity, which means fewer of the beneficial strains of the microbes. Ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease, the two main forms of IBD, inflammatory bowel disease. Strong links to these conditions, ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease, have strong links with stress, trauma, and just psychiatric comorbidity, PTSD. Stress can worsen flares, while flares can worsen stress. The cycle looks a lot like IBS, but with added immune activation. So that looks like dysregulated HPA axis, which is stress hormones. And this is often found in these patients. Other conditions include gastritis and functional dyspepsia. Stress and anxiety can increase stomach acid and sensitivity. Some people develop chronic upper abdominal pain, nausea, or bloating with no clear structural explanation. Again, brain-gut miscommunication is a huge driver. And then there's diet. Diets high in fiber, vegetables, and fermented foods are associated with a richer microbiome and lower rates of depression. So high fiber, high vegetable intake, fermented foods are good for the stomach, good for the brain, good for your mental health. On the flip side, diets heavy in processed foods, added sugars, and artificial sweeteners can disrupt that ecosystem and increase inflammation, setting the stage for both gut symptoms and mental health issues, mood issues, anxiety, depression. This is why the brain-gut axis is so exciting in psychiatry. It helps explain why two people with the same diagnosis can have completely different treatment responses. If someone's gut ecosystem is fueling anxiety signals, an SSRI alone might not get them all the way better. And for someone else, stabilizing the microbiome could be the missing piece in their recovery. So when we say the gut has a mind of its own, this is what we are talking about. It's not just about indigestion or nerves or butterflies. It's about how stress, food, microbes, and mood form a constant feedback loop that can make people feel trapped in cycles of illness. Once you recognize that cycle, you can start to intervene differently. Before we wrap up, I wanted to mention some common misconceptions. There are some claims that probiotics cure depression. The research is promising, but it's still too early. Certain strains of probiotics, sometimes called psychobiotics, have been shown to reduce mild anxiety or depressive symptoms in small studies. But this is not a substitute for therapy, lifestyle changes, or medication when needed. Think about probiotics like a supporting piece to the puzzle. It's a piece of the puzzle. Some people will have you believe that if you're anxious, then stomach issues are just all in your head. But stress does affect digestion. The gut itself sends powerful signals back to the brain. IBS, Crohn's, and other conditions involve real physiological changes. Saying it's just stress dismisses and minimizes the very real biology happening inside the body, inside the gut. In truth, it's a two-way conversation. Both the head, the mind, the brain, and the stomach, the gut, the intestines, your abdomen, and your head. They're both involved. Another misconception is all gut bacteria are good for you. Some microbes are beneficial. Others are just neither here nor there. They're neutral. Some are harmful if they overgrow. Everything in moderation, that's the bottom line. Balance is the key. An imbalanced microbiome, dysbiosis, can actually increase inflammation and worsen mood and cognition. Diversity, not just quantity, and balance is what matters. Gut health is just about diet. Another misconception. Some people will tell you that if you have an unhealthy GI situation going on, that it is directly and solely related to your diet. Although diet is huge, it's not the whole picture either. It's another piece of the puzzle. Chronic stress, poor sleep, and lack of physical activity all change the microbiome too. Even your social connections and environment play a role. You can't just fix your gut with kale smoothies and salad every day or going vegan. It's a lifestyle. It's sometimes an entire lifestyle adjustment. So in closing, the brain-gut axis is real, powerful, and important. But it's also not magic. It's not a cure-all. It's one piece of a much larger puzzle. And when we keep that perspective in mind, we can use the science without getting lost in the hype. Meaning, understanding how important it is, but also keeping our bearings in reality for how much it can benefit. If we try to change everything about our gut biome right now, that doesn't mean that it's going to change every other aspect of our lives. We have to be realistic. Because that's how people get caught up in diet fads, spending a lot of money buying all these different probiotics and different things, banking on them doing something that maybe they can't do, and then potentially being disappointed. We need to look at the facts. So what can you actually do with all this brain-gut science that we've just talked about? Let's get practical. Number one, I would say feed your microbes. Your gut bacteria thrive on fiber and diversity. Studies show that people who eat 30 different plant-based foods per week, that's a lot. I mean, for some people, that's a lot, and with access. I know some people are hearing that thinking, wow. Studies show that people who eat 30 different plant-based foods per week have a richer, more resilient microbiome than those who eat less than 10. Go back to the food pyramid. Foods like fruits, vegetables, beans, nuts, seeds, whole grains. Every new color on your plate is like adding another instrument to your microbiome's band. It's like making it stronger, and the more types of different foods that you eat as frequently as possible, you're making your stomach stronger. You're also making your mind stronger too. Number 2, I would say add fermented foods specifically. Some people do not like fermented foods because they are acquired taste, some of them, but there's always a way to incorporate things into your diet, even if you have to get a little bit creative. Fermented would be like yogurt with live cultures, kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi, miso. A clinical trial found that eating 4 servings of fermented foods per day increased microbial diversity and lowered inflammation in just 10 weeks, which is pretty amazing. A third tip would be to manage your stress as well as you can. Remember the vagus nerve. Don't forget about the vagus nerve. The communication highway between your gut and your brain. How could you forget? Deep breathing, yoga, meditation, humming, or singing can even stimulate it. Mantras, chanting, like you've heard it. These practices don't just calm the mind, they send signals down to calm the gut as well. Number 4 is always prioritize sleep. Sleep is so underrated. Sleep deprivation shifts your microbiome composition within as little as 48 hours. So it's detrimental in as little as 2 days if you're not getting the appropriate and adequate amount of sleep that your body needs, then your gut starts to suffer quickly. Protecting your sleep schedule is protecting your gut, which in turn supports your mood. Number 5, be cautious with antibiotics and processed foods. First of all, let's keep this in the forefront of our minds. If a doctor has not done a culture or they don't have a definitive diagnosis as to which kind of bacteria is living inside your body when they prescribe you an antibiotic, because remember, antibiotics are treating bacteria, not viruses. So if you go, this is a side rant, I'm sorry. If you go to a healthcare provider, like a regular healthcare provider with flu symptoms or cold symptoms or runny nose, stuffy nose, run-of-the-mill things, and they prescribe you an antibiotic, but they've done no kind of sputum culture or anything like that, they're doing you a disservice because of what we're about to talk about, which is antibiotics are meant for bacteria. They're not meant for a virus. So what are you treating? Then you take this antibiotic and now you're building up a resistance. That's the other thing. If you are prescribed an antibiotic and you do start taking it, it is important that even after you start to feel better, you finish out the entire course of that antibiotic so that your body doesn't build up a resistance to that antibiotic. In the future, when you get that antibiotic and you actually have bacteria or whatever the case may be, it's much stronger in your body. That's what we're getting to. Antibiotics save lives when needed, but overuse can wipe out whole colonies, whole armies of good bacteria in your body, in your gut. And ultra-processed foods with additives or just like added sweeteners, artificial sweeteners, have been shown to alter the microbiome in ways that increase swelling, inflammation, irritation. And the most important is number 6, which is do not self-blame. I repeat, don't self-blame. It's not your fault if you are sitting here thinking about your own pattern, your own cycle of mental health struggles and GI issues. Because for a lot of us, it goes way, way, way back, maybe even childhood, grade school years where we had anxiety before school or during an event. So don't self-blame. It's okay to sit with it. That's all fine. Take the information for what it's worth and apply it to your life how you can. If you're struggling with IBS, depression, anxiety, Crohn's disease, colitis, gastritis, it's not because you ate the wrong yogurt or you didn't cut the right people in your life or because of the way your childhood was. Stuff that we're discussing is complex biology. Supporting your gut health is a powerful tool, but it's not easy. You deserve care and compassion, not shame and not being hard on yourself. Because that's also just hinders you from going where you want to go. So, if you want to take care of your mental health, it's worth listening to your gut, at the very least, because supporting that second brain supports the first one too. We usually think of our minds as sitting entirely in our heads. It just lives up there. Thoughts, memories, feelings, emotions, they're all upstairs. But the truth is, our mind extends further. It lives in our chest with our heartbeat. And it lives in our gut, in our intestines, with every twist, turn, and flutter that we experience. The brain-gut axis reminds us that mental health isn't just about psychology or just about biology. It's about the whole system. Nerves, hormones, microbes, emotions, all woven together. Next time you feel those butterflies in your stomach or that pain in your abdomen, that heaviness in your gut, don't brush it off as random. That's your body's second brain talking. Listen to it. It's telling you how you're doing before your mind even catches up. And maybe the real lesson here is that listening to your gut isn't just a figure of speech. It's a way of practicing self-awareness. It's easy to become jaded in our society. But this is a reminder that your body and your mind are on the same team. And they're way more influenced by each other than you might have been told. And when you learn to honor that connection, you don't just treat symptoms. You nurture resilience and healing from the inside out. Thank you for being here today. I really like this topic, and I just think it's so important. There is a lot of new information coming out, and maybe the people that were already hip to this, they knew that there was a stronger connection between their mind and their stomach than what was in our textbooks at the time. But I'm really glad that we are making progress in this area. See you in the next episode.